On the first Mother's Day after I buried my husband, my own sons told me, "Mom, we have a special gift for you, just the way Dad liked it." In that moment, I understood that the hell I had lived through for 30 years did not end with my husband. It would continue, more cruelly, through the very monsters I had given birth to. This is a true story about the inheritance of violence, about the invisible chains passed from father to son, and about a mother who had to destroy her family in order to save it. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because some truths need to be told, even if they shake your beliefs. Some stories, no matter how painful, must be told. But before I get to that part, I need to go back in time a bit so you can understand how I got there. I was born in 1953 in a simple wooden house with a tin roof that made a racket when it rained hard. My father, Henry, worked on a cotton farm. He would spend days out in the fields, coming back with calloused hands, but he always brought a piece of pumpkin fudge that he'd buy at Mr. Miller's general store. My mother, Clara, took care of me and my 3 brothers, Robert, the oldest, David, the middle one, and me, the only girl, until my baby brother Samuel was born when I was 8. Our house in Cottonwood Creek was on the edge of a dirt road. It had only 2 bedrooms, one for my parents and another where we, the 4 children, slept on 2 straw mattresses on the floor. The kitchen had a wood-fired stove that Mom would light up early, while it was still dark, to make coffee. The bathroom was a little shed outside, and we bathed with a cup, using water heated in the kettle. On winter nights, which are quite cold in northern Arizona, Mom would heat bricks in the embers and wrap them in cloth for us to put at our feet before sleeping. We woke up with the rooster's crow. My brothers would go help with the chores, while I stayed with Mom, learning to make bread, lye soap, and tend the vegetable garden. She always said, "Alice, a woman has to know how to do a little bit of everything, because life doesn't give you any breaks." And it really didn't. While the rich girls in town studied at the schoolhouse in pretty uniforms, I could only attend school until the 3rd grade. After that, it was work at home, from sunup to sundown. On Sunday afternoons, after Mass at the little St. Joseph's Church, we would play in the yard. I loved playing Ring Around the Rosie with the neighborhood girls, Emily, Hannah, and Sophie. We'd sing London Bridge is Falling Down until the sun went down. My brother David was the best baseball player and always won the games against the other boys. As for Robert, he preferred setting traps to catch little birds, which made my heart ache because I loved the little creatures. It was around this time, I must have been about 9, that I started to notice how things worked differently for men and women in our family. When there was a 4th of July barbecue or a community barn raising, Dad and my brothers could stay out late, drinking and telling stories. Mom and I had to go home early to prepare everything for the next day. "A woman on the street after 8? She's no good," my father would say with that look that accepted no argument. I remember one time I didn't wash my father's Sunday shirt well. He came home, looked at the yellowish stain on the white collar, and raised his hand to hit me. Mom put herself in front, took the slap in my place, and later, in secret, taught me to use laundry bluing in the rinse water to make the whites whiter. "This is how you do it, daughter. Men don't like poorly washed clothes," she explained, her face still red from the slap. "My dears, it sounds strange, doesn't it? I understand now that my mother wasn't teaching me to be a slave. She was teaching me how to survive in the only world she knew." It was a painful lesson, and sadly, a very effective one. At school, the teacher, Mrs. Davis, was strict but fair. She caught me drawing instead of doing my multiplication tables, and instead of punishing me, she gave me a little sketchbook. "Girl, you have talent. It's a shame you're going to waste it." I didn't understand what she meant at the time, but today I know very well. She saw my future before I could even imagine it. Marry young, have children, work the land, and repeat my mother's life. At 12, I got my period for the first time. Mom explained the womanly things to me in a whisper, as if it were a shameful secret. She taught me how to use the cotton cloths she sewed herself and to wash them in secret. Why? Because a man can't see these private things. From then on, my brothers started to look at me differently. I couldn't swim in Oak Creek with them anymore, or sit with my legs open, or talk to the boys after Mass. It was around that same time that a large construction company showed up there in Cottonwood Creek and started hiring the local men. My father left the cotton fields and went to work at the site. He earned a little more, but he started coming home more stressed, complaining about the boss, the hard work, the foreman who was always on his case. And when he was stressed, it was best for everyone to stay quiet, because any little thing was a reason for him to explode. Mom always said, "Alice, when your father gets home, have a basin of warm water ready for his feet and a glass of whiskey served. A tired man gets angry easily, and a smart woman knows how to tame him." I obeyed, thinking that was the right way for things to be. I didn't know I was learning lessons that would one day cost me dearly. And so my childhood in Cottonwood Creek went on, between farm work, a few games, church on Sundays, and my mother's teachings on how to be a good woman. I dreamed of having a better life, maybe in the big city, far from that poverty. Little did I know that those dreams would lead me straight into the trap that fate was setting. When I turned 13-inch 1966, Dad decided it was time to try for a life in a bigger city. The construction site where he worked suddenly shut down, leaving many families in Cottonwood Creek without a livelihood. A distant cousin of his told him about opportunities in Flagstaff, another city in Arizona, but much larger, where they were building a lot of buildings and needed strong men to work. We packed our few belongings into 2 wooden chests and set off on a journey that took almost a full day in a cargo truck, sitting on top of our furniture. Our new house in Flagstaff was a little better than the last one. It had electricity, something we barely knew back in Cottonwood Creek. It was a cramped 2-story house in a narrow alley, but at least we had a bathroom inside, which Mom considered a real luxury. The floor was polished concrete, cold on winter mornings, and the walls had damp stains that formed strange patterns that gave me nightmares. Dad got a job at a construction company as a mason's assistant. Robert, my oldest brother, already 17, also went to work on the construction sites. David got a job delivering bread for a bakery, and I started helping Mom do laundry for other people. We would wake up at 5-inch the morning to pick up the bundles of dirty clothes from the rich families downtown and spend the day scrubbing, bleaching, and ironing. It was around this time that I met Walter Thompson. He was a foreman at the construction company where my father worked. He was 28 years old, considered a man of position and respect in the city. Tall, dark-haired, with a well-trimmed mustache and dark eyes that seemed to see right through you. He always came to pick up Dad for work in an olive green Jeep he had bought from the Army. And every time he saw me hanging clothes on the line in the backyard, he would slow down and watch me. One Sunday after Mass, he showed up at our house with a gift for my father, a bottle of good-quality whiskey. They sat talking in the living room while Mom had me serve coffee and cookies. I remember the way Walter looked at me, following my every move around the room. After a few visits like that, he finally spoke to my father. "Mr. Martin, I've got my eye on your girl. I want to ask for her hand in courtship." Dad, already a little tipsy from the whiskey, let out a laugh and replied, "But Alice is still a child, man. She's not even 14 yet." Walter wasn't fazed. He looked at me with those eyes that made me tremble and said something whose true meaning I would only understand years later. "Country girls mature early, Mr. Martin, and I prefer to raise them my way." Those words hang in the air, don't they? A chilling statement of intent, less a proposal, and more a declaration of ownership. For a young Alice, this was the moment her future was decided for her, and you have to wonder if anyone truly understood the danger she was in. That night, I heard my parents arguing in their room. Mom thought I was too young, that I should at least finish grade school before thinking about marriage. But Dad insisted it was a unique opportunity. An established man with a good job, his own house, no vices, apart from an occasional cigarette. "He's a catch far above what Alice could ever hope for," he said. "If we don't take it, she'll end up as a housemaid or worse." It sounds like my father sold his own daughter, doesn't it? But in his mind, trapped in that poverty, it was the only way for me to escape a life as a housemaid. He chose a gilded cage for me, never knowing that the cage was far worse than the poverty we left behind. 2 weeks later, I was officially engaged to Walter Thompson. I had no choice, no voice in the decision. I was given a thin gold ring that was so big it slipped off my finger, and I was instructed to call him sir when we were in public. The courtship was chaperoned, always in the living room with my parents nearby. Walter brought gifts not just for me, but for the whole family. A new radio, fabric for Mom to make dresses, even a bicycle for Samuel, my youngest brother. But there was something in the way he spoke to me when no one was paying attention. "When we're married, I'm going to teach you how to be a real woman," he would whisper, holding my wrist tight enough to leave marks. No gossiping with the neighbors or sashaying down the street. A wife of mine has composure. I remember one day we were sitting on the porch and my cousin Ethan came to visit. He was my age, and we grew up together in Cottonwood Creek. When Walter saw us laughing at a silly joke, his face transformed. He didn't say anything at the time, but when Ethan left, he squeezed my arm so hard that I had 5 purple bruises from his fingers. "I never want to see you laughing like that with another man again. Understand?" I nodded, swallowing my tears. When I told my mother about it, she just sighed and said, "Men get jealous, my daughter. It's because he likes you, but be careful not to provoke him." And just like that, the one person who should have been her protector instead handed her a manual for survival in a prison she didn't yet understand. This painful advice would echo through Alice's life for decades. Let's see how these lessons played out on the night she was married. The wedding was set for the day after my 15th birthday. I didn't have the sweet 15 party I had dreamed of, just a simple cake after the church ceremony. My dress was sewn by my mother from a simple white fabric, without the embroidery and lace I saw in magazines. Walter didn't want extravagance. He said the important thing was to save for our future. The night before the wedding, my mother came to give me advice. She sat on the edge of the bed where I slept with my brothers and, in a low voice, told me, "Alice, tomorrow you'll be a married woman. What happens between a husband and wife in bed is the wife's duty. Sometimes it hurts, sometimes it's uncomfortable, but you have to endure it in silence. Never say no to your husband. A man who is rejected by his wife will look for it elsewhere, and turn a blind eye if he's rough. Men can't control their nature." I didn't really understand what she meant. In catechism class, the priest talked about the sacrament of matrimony as a sacred union blessed by God. He never mentioned pain or suffering. In my girlish mind, I still imagined being married was like in the soap operas. A handsome, gentle man, a tidy house, maybe sweet children playing in the yard. The reality was very different. Our honeymoon was in the bedroom of Walter's house, where I moved in with my single suitcase of clothes. The first night was a nightmare I dare not describe in detail, but I woke up the next day feeling like my body no longer belonged to me. I cried secretly in the bathroom while Walter made coffee, whistling as if nothing had happened. The naive little Alice who dreamed of a marriage like in the movies died that night, my dears. The person who walked out of the bathroom the next morning was someone else. Someone who was learning to hide her tears and shatter in silence. It's a heartbreaking turning point, isn't it? The moment a girl's spirit is broken and replaced by a survivor's silence. This was only the first night of a lifetime of rules and corrections, and the beginning of a life lived inside a cage. "From today on, you will no longer wear pants," he announced as we ate. "Only dresses below the knee. And that hair needs to be cut shorter. I don't want a wife of mine looking like a movie star." It was just the beginning of an endless list of rules. I couldn't wear lipstick, couldn't listen to loud music, couldn't chat with neighbors at the window, couldn't go out alone, not even to shop. My world, which was already small, narrowed until it fit only inside that house. My parents and brothers came to visit on Sundays. Mom would look at me with a mixture of concern and resignation, but she never asked how I really was. I think she feared the answer. Dad and Walter would drink and talk about football and politics as if everything were normal. No one noticed, or pretended not to notice, when I showed up with a makeshift bandage on my arm or with heavier makeup to hide a mark on my face. "She fell down the stairs," Walter would explain, laughing. "My wife is very clumsy." At 16, I became pregnant with my first child. The pregnancy didn't improve my situation. On the contrary, Walter became even more controlling, accusing me of using my belly as an excuse not to fulfill my wifely duties. When the doctor recommended bed rest in the last trimester because of some bleeding, He called me lazy and useless like your mother. James was born in 1970, a strong boy who soon showed he had his father's temperament. A year and a half later came Michael, and in 1975, completing our family, Daniel was born. 3 sons, the pride of Walter, who made a point of showing everyone how strong and brave his heirs were. "I'm raising real men, not sissies," he would say when he taught the boys, still small, to throw punches in the air. "A woman needs a slap every now and then to keep her from getting too confident." And the boys would laugh, finding it funny, without understanding the horror behind those words, or perhaps understanding it all too well. The years went by, and my sons grew up in the image and likeness of their father. Walter made it a point to educate the boys to be men, as he said. This meant teaching them that crying was for girls, that feelings were weakness, and that women needed to be tamed. How many times did I hear him say at the dinner table, "Look how well your mother obeys. That's how you have to make your wives be when you grow up." When James was 8, Walter started encouraging him to correct me when I did something wrong. "Go on, son. Show your mother who's boss. Give her a little slap for spilling coffee on the tablecloth." And my boy, wanting his father's approval, would slap my arm while Walter laughed, proud. This is such a deeply disturbing moment. You can see the poison of abuse seeping into the next generation, twisting a child's need for a father's love into an act of cruelty. This one terrible lesson would have consequences that would haunt Alice for the rest of her life. The worst part was seeing the eyes of my other sons, Michael and Daniel, shining with admiration for their older brother. Our house in Flagstaff had become a school of violence, where Walter was the teacher and my sons were diligent students. The television he bought in 1980, a luxury few in the neighborhood had, could only be turned on for the news and football. "Those soap operas only teach women shamelessness," he would say. Even when he was traveling for work, the boys followed the rules to the letter. "Dad said you can't watch television, Mom." At home, I was less than a maid. At least maids get a salary and can leave at the end of the day. I cooked, washed, ironed, cleaned, tended the garden, sewed the boys' clothes, and still had to be perfectly put together when Walter got home from work. A single hair out of place, a poorly sewn button on his shirt, a smudge on his coffee cup. Anything was a reason for what he called a correction. The people in the neighborhood pretended not to see, not to hear. When I showed up at Sunday Mass with a black eye, the women would look away. The men would greet Walter with respect. After all, he was an engineer at the construction company, a position he'd earned studying at night. He was a success story, a beautiful house, a respected family. Once, in 1983, I worked up the courage and went to the police station when Walter broke my arm in an argument about Daniel's low grade at school. The boys saw the whole thing. James was 13, Michael was 11, and little Daniel was only 8. Sheriff Miller was a good friend of Walter's, the godfather of my Michael. He looked at me with a mixture of irritation and disdain. "Mrs. Martin, problems between a husband and wife are resolved at home. What do you want? To destroy your family, leave your children without a father? Go home and be a better wife, and these things won't happen." Can you feel the weight of that door slamming shut? When the law itself sides with the abuser, where is a person supposed to turn? At this moment, Alice was truly, completely alone, trapped inside the 4 walls of her home with no hope of escape. You see, my dears, even the last door, the door of justice, was slammed shut in my face. In that moment, I understood that I was completely alone. The pain of a woman within her own 4 walls meant nothing to them. I returned home devastated, my arm throbbing inside the makeshift cast. Walter was waiting for me in the living room, a belt wrapped around his hand. I don't need to tell you what happened next. What hurt the most, though, was seeing my sons watching, learning that this was how you treated a rebellious woman. In 1987, Walter received an offer to work for a larger construction company in Tucson, Arizona. It was an important position, with a better salary and a house provided by the company. We packed everything up and moved. James, already 17, was furious about leaving his friends, his school, his girlfriend. He blamed me for the move, as if I had any decision-making power. "Why didn't you convince Dad to stay? All you're good for is saying yes to everything he wants." Our house in Tucson was bigger, in a middle-class neighborhood, with a front garden and a backyard. The neighbors were more distant, each living their own lives. This meant fewer prying eyes, fewer questions about bruises, fewer witnesses. In Tucson, Walter wore a tie and held a management position. He had appearances to maintain, so the violence changed. It became more calculated, less impulsive, but no less devastating. The boys enrolled in good schools. Walter insisted that they study, that they become someone in life, not a nobody like their grandfather. James chose to study engineering like his father. Michael decided to go into business administration. Daniel, always quieter, ended up in accounting. They all studied and worked. Walter did not tolerate loafing. I tried to get a job at a clothing store near the house. For a brief moment, I dreamed of a little independence, of having my own money, maybe saving it secretly for a day. I don't even know for what. Maybe just to feel like I had choices. Walter found out when he saw the job application I had filled out in secret. Are you crazy? A wife of mine doesn't work. What will people think? That I can't support my family? That my wife has to stoop to working behind a counter? He tore the paper into little pieces in front of me and threw them in my face. That night we had dinner in silence, the tension so thick it felt hard to breathe. After the boys went to bed, he taught me to never again try to be equal to a man. The 92nd arrived, and with them, some changes in the world. On television, they started talking about women's rights, about domestic violence. There were reports, phone numbers for hotlines, but in our house, time seemed to have stood still. My sons were adults now, but they still lived under the same roof. They still followed Walter's rules, still treated me the way he treated me. A new neighbor, Patricia, moved in next door in 1995. She was a university professor, divorced, with modern ideas. She tried to get close to me, invited me for coffee, noticed when I showed up bruised. Once, she gave me a newspaper clipping with information about a shelter for women in situations of violence. Alice, no one deserves to live like this. You can leave. You can start over. I hid the paper inside my Bible, the only place Walter wouldn't touch. For weeks, I looked at that phone number, imagining a different life. But then I would think, where would I go? I was over 40, had never worked, had no money of my own, no education, and my sons, they would turn against me, I was sure of it. They were so molded by their father that they would see me as a traitor. One day, Walter found the clipping. I don't know how, maybe he saw me looking at the Bible too often. He didn't say anything, just smiled in a way that chilled me to the bone. 3 days later, I found out that Patricia had been transferred to another city in a hurry. I never knew what he did or said, but I knew that smile. It was the same one he had when he solved problems at work. The years passed like a gray fog. James married Jessica, a shy girl from church, in 1997. I saw in her eyes the same fear I had carried in mine for decades. I wanted to warn her, to say something, but the words got stuck in my throat. What right did I have to speak when I couldn't even save myself? Michael met Linda in 1999, a woman a little older than him, a widow with a little girl. Walter didn't approve. A divorced woman is no good. But for the first time, Michael stood up to him. It was the only time I saw one of my sons disagree with their father. I thought maybe there was hope for him. How wrong I was. Soon after the wedding, the comments began. She talks too much. I need to teach her to respect a man. My heart sank hearing that. Daniel, the youngest, remained single longer. Quiet, observant, he seemed the least aggressive of the three. Maybe that's why Walter picked on him more, calling him a softy and weak. When he finally introduced his girlfriend, Sarah, in 2002, it was as if he wanted to prove something to his father. She knows her place, Dad. I guarantee she won't be trouble like the others. In 2004, on Walter's 66th birthday, I had a strange premonition. He seemed more irritable than usual, complaining of chest pains, tingling in his arm. The doctor had recommended less salt, less fat, no alcohol, but Walter was Walter. No one told him what he could or could not do. I'll eat what I want, drink what I want. I'm not going to be like those old men in a nursing home eating mush. It was a Sunday morning in January 2005. Walter woke up, complained of chest pain, cursed me because the coffee was weak, and collapsed in the middle of the kitchen. His eyes widened in surprise, as if he couldn't believe something like that could happen to him. I called the ambulance, yelled for the boys, did everything I was supposed to do, but when the paramedics arrived, it was too late. Massive heart attack, they said. At the wake, I stood by the coffin, as protocol dictated. People came to offer their condolences, to say what a good man Walter was, hardworking, dedicated to his family. I nodded, my eyes dry. I couldn't cry. Inside me, a small flame of hope was beginning to ignite. At 52, for the first time in my adult life, I was free. A breath of freedom after nearly 40 years of suffocation. You can just imagine the fragile hope beginning to bloom in Alice's heart. But as we know from the beginning of her story, the nightmare was far from over. It was just about to change its form. For a few weeks, I breathed an air I hadn't tasted in nearly 40 years. The air of possibility. I started making small plans in the quiet of my mind. I would paint the bedroom walls a soft yellow, the color of daffodils. I'd replace the heavy, dark curtains Walter had chosen with something light and sheer, to let the morning sun pour in. I even imagined rearranging the living room furniture, a simple act of ownership I had never been allowed. It wasn't about grand rebellion. It was about the quiet joy of making a space my own, of finally being the mistress of my own small world. This fragile hope felt like a tiny seedling pushing its way through cracked, dry earth. It was a foolish, beautiful dream I held close to my heart. Little did I know the nightmare was just changing its form. After the burial, when we returned home, my 3 sons, James at 35, Michael at 33, and Daniel at 30, called me for a talk in the living room. They sat in the same spots they occupied when their father was alive, as if his ghost still presided over the family meeting. Mom, James began with the same serious expression as his father. Now that Dad is gone, we have to take care of you. He left us this responsibility. I nodded, not understanding the weight of those words. I thought they meant helping financially, being there for me. I didn't imagine what would come next. You will continue to live here, he continued, but some things are going to change. Each of us will take over a part of the household expenses, and in return, you will take care of everything as you always have. And no going out alone, Michael added. A woman without a husband is an easy target. Dad wouldn't like to see you giving people something to talk about. Daniel just watched, quiet as always, but nodding at every word his brothers said. It was as if Walter had split into 3 and was still there, controlling my life. The morning after the funeral, I woke up with a strange feeling. A mixture of grief for the loss, after all. It had been almost 40 years together, and a glimpse of the possibility of a different life. I thought about maybe painting the bedroom a lighter color, rearranging the furniture, planting different flowers in the garden, small changes that would have been impossible with Walter. But I soon realized that the chains had only changed hands. My sons took turns keeping me company, or rather, watching over me. When I suggested changing the color of the living room curtains, James frowned. Dad chose that color. Why change it now? The weeks after the funeral were a period of adjustment. The boys, now grown men, but always boys to me, took control of everything. James handled the finances, Michael the household matters, repairs, taxes, and Daniel was in charge of accompanying me on necessary outings, the grocery store, the pharmacy, the doctor. Never alone, never free to choose what to wear, what to watch on television, what time to go to sleep. Walter's shadow loomed over us, guiding every decision, every rule, every prohibition. Mother's Day of 2005 arrived just 4 months after Walter's death. It was the first one without him, and I confess I felt a little flutter in my stomach, thinking that maybe, just maybe, it could be a different day. In the preceding weeks, I noticed my sons whispering among themselves, exchanging knowing glances. Naively, I thought they were preparing a pleasant surprise for me. On that Sunday morning, I woke up early, as usual, to make coffee. James had insisted that everyone have lunch at our house, including their wives and children. I made sure to prepare a special lunch, fried chicken with mashed potatoes, the recipe my mother taught me. As I cooked, I daydreamed. Maybe my sons would give me flowers, Maybe the little grandchildren had made colorful cards at school. After lunch, when we finished clearing the dishes, James asked everyone to gather in the living room. The children were sent to the backyard to play. Their wives sat quietly in a corner, as if they already knew what was coming. My 3 sons stood side by side, facing me with an expression that immediately reminded me of Walter. "Mom," James began, "today is a special day, the first Mother's Day since Dad passed." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. There was something in his tone that didn't feel right. "The 3 of us have talked a lot," he continued, "about how to honor Dad's memory and how to maintain our family's traditions." Michael took a step forward. "You know, Dad was a man of principles. He taught us that a house needs order, discipline." Daniel, usually the quietest, completed. "And he taught us that this discipline needed to be reinforced from time to time." It was at that moment that I understood. My heart started beating so fast I thought I was going to faint. My hands started to tremble, and I felt a bitter taste in my mouth. "We have a special gift for you," James announced with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, just the way Dad liked it. What happened next was like a nightmare in slow motion. James approached and slapped me across the face, not hard enough to leave a mark, but enough to burn my skin and my soul. "This is for making the food too salty today." Michael came next. "And this is for talking to that new neighbor without our permission." Another slap, this time harder. Daniel hesitated for a brief second. I saw something in his eyes, maybe doubt, but he quickly composed himself and completed the ritual. "And this is to remember that you still need correction, even without Dad here." A push that made me fall back onto the sofa. The physical pain was nothing compared to the pain of this ultimate betrayal. In that moment, Walter's legacy was cemented, living on through the very sons she raised. How does a person go on after a revelation like that? Let's listen. I was paralyzed, tears streaming silently down my face. Not from physical pain that was nothing compared to what I had endured at the hands of Walter. It was the pain of complete and devastating understanding. Can you imagine it? The physical pain was nothing. The real pain is realizing that the seeds you planted and nurtured have grown into the very poison tree that has poisoned your entire life. The violence didn't die with Walter. It lived on in my own flesh and blood. My sons, whom I had carried in my womb, breastfed, and raised with all the love I could give despite the circumstances, had become extensions of their father. The abuse would continue through them. "This will happen every Mother's Day," James explained, as if explaining a simple rule to a child. "It's our way of honoring Dad and making sure you stay on the right path." I looked at my daughters-in-law. Jessica, James's wife, kept her eyes down, her hands nervously clutching the fabric of her skirt. Linda, Michael's wife, bit her lower lip, a single tear running down her face. Sarah, the youngest, married to Daniel, seemed to be in shock, her face as pale as paper. That night, locked in my room, I cried until there were no tears left. Not for what had happened, I was used to much worse, but for the realization that there would never be an escape. The cycle would continue, year after year, Mother's Day after Mother's Day, until I died, or they got tired of it. In the months that followed, I saw subtle changes in my sons' behavior with their wives. The same control, the same corrections, the same humiliations that Walter had inflicted on me. It was like watching a movie I already knew, frame by frame, unable to change the script. Mother's Day of 2006 repeated the ritual, and 2007 as well. It became a macabre tradition, a horrible secret we shared as a family. My grandchildren were growing up, watching, learning, just as my sons had learned from their father. It was in October of 2007 that Daniel came home with the news. Sarah is pregnant. Everyone celebrated, especially when the ultrasound revealed it would be a girl, the first in the family after so many boys. I saw the way my son looked at his wife's belly, a mixture of pride and something else, possessiveness. "I'm going to raise her right," he commented during a dinner. "None of this modern, independent woman stuff. She's going to be a respectable young lady." Something woke up inside me at that moment. A spark I thought had been extinguished decades ago. A girl, my granddaughter, destined to repeat my story, to live under the same yoke I had lived. That night, I had a vivid dream about my mother. She was standing in the kitchen of our old house in Cottonwood Creek, kneading bread. She looked at me and said with a clarity she never had in life, "Alice, you let this happen. Now, are you going to let it happen to your granddaughter too?" My mother's words in that dream were like a bolt of lightning that woke me up. For so many years, all I knew was fear for myself. But thinking of little Sophia, an innocent soul about to walk into that same hell, no, I couldn't let that happen. For the first time, my anger finally became stronger than my fear, and there it is, the spark that changes everything. After a lifetime of fear, a new feeling takes root, a protective anger, not for herself, but for the innocent child about to enter the same prison. This was the moment Alice began to forge a weapon out of her pain. I woke up bathed in sweat, my heart pounding. For the first time in many years, I felt something beyond fear and resignation. I felt anger, a deep, visceral anger that burned inside me. Not for myself, it was too late for me, but for that child who had not yet been born, for my daughters-in-law who were living the same hell I had lived. The next day, I began to watch Sarah more closely. I noticed the fearful glances she gave Daniel when he raised his voice, the way she flinched when he made a sudden move. I started finding ways to be alone with her, offering to help with the baby's layette, to accompany her to the doctor. One afternoon, while we were sewing tiny clothes for the baby together, I worked up the courage. "Sarah, my dear, does he hurt you?" She froze, the needle still in the air, her eyes wide with fear. After a long silence, a single tear ran down her face. She didn't have to say anything. "How long?" "Since the first year of marriage," she whispered. At first, it was just yelling, then pushing. Now. Her voice trailed off. I took her hands in mine, noticing the small, familiar bruises on her wrists. "You know it's not your fault, right?" She broke down in silent tears. "He says I provoke him, that I don't know how to be a good wife. Now with the baby coming, I'm so scared." At that moment, something broke and reconnected inside me, a determination I hadn't felt since my youth, before Walter destroyed my will. "This can't continue, Sarah. Not with you. Not with the baby." In the following months, I started doing small things. I managed to hide a small notebook where I wrote down dates, times, details of every incident I witnessed or heard about. When I was alone, I secretly listened to radio programs that talked about domestic violence, jotting down phone numbers, names of organizations. The internet, which my sons only allowed me to use for recipes and appropriate topics, became my secret ally. I learned to clear the browsing history after researching women's shelters, legal rights, how to escape abusive relationships. Every day, I gathered more information, more courage. Sarah wasn't the only one. Through careful conversations, I discovered that Jessica and Linda were living in similar situations. 3 women, 3 stories identical to mine, and soon a little girl would enter this perverse cycle. A few days before the planned lunch, I found Sarah rocking Sophia in the nursery. I sat beside her, my hands clutching the notebook where I documented their lives. "They agreed to the lunch," I whispered. Her eyes widened with fear. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to tell the truth," I said, my voice barely audible, but firm. "All of it." She started to tremble. "They'll destroy you, Alice. They'll say you're crazy." I placed my hand over hers. "They might," I admitted. "But Sarah, look at this little girl. If we stay silent, we are helping them build her prison. I cannot do that. I will not do that. I don't ask you to speak, only to know that you are the reason I am finally finding my voice." For the first time, Alice isn't just surviving. She's planning. She's becoming a protector. This quiet conversation is the beginning of a rebellion decades in the making, and it all leads to one explosive confrontation on Mother's Day. In April 2008, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby girl they named Sophia. When I held that tiny creature in my arms for the first time, I made a silent promise. "You will not live like I lived. You will be free." Mother's Day of 2008 was approaching, and with it the terrible ritual my sons had established. But this time, I had a plan, a dangerous plan that could either destroy my family or save it. 3 weeks before that dreaded Sunday, my plan began to take shape. It was a terrifying, audacious plan, born from decades of silent observation. I knew my sons. Their arrogance was their weakness. They believed their power was absolute within the walls of our home. So, I had to bring the outside world in. I started planting the seed with calculated innocence. "James," I said one evening, my voice light. I was thinking, now that we have so many mothers in the family, shouldn't we have a big celebration for Mother's Day? Invite Jessica's parents, and Linda's, and Sarah's. A real family gathering. He was immediately suspicious. "Our traditions are private, Mom." But I persisted, leveraging their own vanity. "Of course, dear, but think of how it will look. A testament to the strong family Walter built. All of us together. It would make your father proud." I framed it not as my desire, but as an extension of their father's legacy. It was a language they understood. After days of my gentle, strategic persistence, they agreed. They saw it as a performance, a way to display their perfect family to the world, never suspecting that the woman they saw as a piece of furniture was about to set the stage on fire. On Mother's Day morning, I woke up with my heart pounding. I spent hours in the kitchen, preparing the most elaborate meal I had ever made. I set the table with the embroidered tablecloth I saved for special occasions. I placed flowers in vases all over the house. When the families started to arrive, the Adamses, Jessica's parents, the Clarks, Linda's parents, and the Bakers, Sarah's parents, plus some aunts and uncles, I noticed the discomfort on my sons' faces. They weren't used to having so many strangers in our home, witnessing our interactions. Lunch proceeded with a poorly disguised tension. My sons were polite but cold. Their wives were nervous, casting apprehensive glances at me, at them, at their own parents. I maintained a placid smile, serving the food, making small talk. When dessert was served, a perfect caramel flan, without a single bubble, James cleared his throat. "Well, I think it's time for the gifts, isn't it?" It was the moment I had been waiting for years without knowing it. I stood up slowly, feeling all eyes on me. My hands were shaking, but my voice came out steady as I began to speak. "Yes, James, it's time for the gifts. But this year, I have a gift for you first." The room fell into absolute silence. You could hear the ticking of the wall clock, a gift Walter had received from his colleagues for his 25th work anniversary. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange warmth in my chest. It wasn't fear, it was determination. "I want to tell all of you a story. A family story that began a long time ago, when I married Walter Thompson." My sons exchanged uneasy glances. James made a move to interrupt me, but I raised my hand in a gesture that surprised everyone, including myself. "No, son. Today, you are all going to listen to me." What a powerful moment. After decades of forced silence, a voice emerges, steady and determined. The stage is set, the audience is captive, and Alice is about to detonate a truth bomb that will either save them all or destroy everything. Let's see what happens next. And I began to narrate, with a calmness I didn't know I possessed, the story of my marriage. The first signs of control, the first slaps, the first humiliations. How Walter isolated me from my family, from friends, from anyone who could help me. How he used his children, our children, as witnesses and then accomplices to the abuse. Walter broke my arm in 1983 because Daniel got a bad grade in school. Do you remember that, boys? You were 13, 11, and 8. You saw your father throw me against the wall and then drag me to the hospital, where he told the doctor I had fallen down the stairs. The guests' faces showed growing horror. Sarah's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Baker, stared at me with wide eyes. Jessica's mother, Mrs. Adams, brought her hands to her mouth. I continued, keeping my voice steady. When Walter died, I thought I would finally have peace, but my sons decided to continue their father's legacy. Do you know what happened on the Mother's Day after his death? I looked directly at each of my sons as I described, without sparing details, the ritual they had created. The slaps, the shoves, the humiliations, all justified as a way to honor Dad's memory and maintain discipline in the house. And it's not just with me. Look at your wives. Look at them. Really. It was at that moment that James stood up, his face red with fury. "Mom, that's enough. You don't know what you're saying. You're confused, mixing things up." "Confused? Then tell me, Jessica, what happened last week when you burned James's shirt? Was that mark on your arm an accident too?" Jessica turned pale, her eyes filled with tears. Her father, Mr. Adams, turned slowly to his son-in-law, a silent question in his eyes. "And you, Linda, want to tell your parents why you had to make up a fall down the stairs last month? Or you, Sarah, want to explain why you're afraid to even speak when Daniel raises his voice?" The silence in the room was dense, suffocating. Then, to my surprise, it was Sarah who spoke first, her voice trembling but determined. "It's true. Everything Mrs. Martin is saying is true." Her father, Mr. Baker, jumped to his feet. "What is going on here, Daniel? Did you hit my daughter?" My youngest son, always the quietest, just lowered his head. He didn't deny it. He couldn't deny it. It was as if a dam had broken. Jessica began to cry openly. Linda, always the strongest of the three, looked at her parents and confirmed with a nod. Michael pushed me down the stairs because I disagreed with him in front of a client. Chaos erupted in the room. Shouts, accusations, denials. My sons tried to justify, to minimize, as they always did. "You don't understand. It's how we were raised," Dad always said. But this time, there were witnesses, outsiders, people who did not accept this as normal, as inevitable. Mr. Clark, Linda's father, a normally calm man, was livid with rage. "My daughter left my house for this, to be treated like an animal? Linda, pack your things. You and the children are coming home right now." Mr. Adams, Jessica's father, grabbed his son-in-law by the shirt. "If you ever lay a finger on my daughter again," Mr. Baker, Sarah's father, simply went to his daughter, took little Sophia in his arms and said, "Let's go home, sweetheart. This ends today." My sons looked on in disbelief, as if they couldn't comprehend what was happening. All their lives, they had been taught that what they did was normal, was right, was the man's role. Now they faced the judgment of the outside world. The house suddenly became terrifyingly silent, my dears. Everything had shattered. I didn't feel triumph, just a vast emptiness. I had destroyed what we called our family, but it was the only way to save the women and children. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, I knew it would be different. That afternoon was the beginning of the end of the cycle of abuse in our family. The daughters-in-law, with their children, went back to their parents' homes. Separation proceedings were initiated. My sons, for the first time in their lives, faced real consequences for their actions. James lost his job at the construction company when his father-in-law, who was one of the partners, revealed the situation. Michael faced an assault charge, but the case was eventually dropped. The prosecutor couldn't move forward because Linda, thinking of the children, was reluctant to testify against him. Daniel, perhaps the least hardened of the three, was the only one to seek help. He began attending a support group for male batterers, encouraged by his father-in-law, who, despite everything, didn't give up on him. As for me, I could no longer stay in that house with my sons. In the weeks following the confrontation, I received threatening calls, surprise visits, attempts to make me retract what I had said. "You destroyed our family," they accused. "How could you do this to us?" It was Mrs. Baker, Sarah's mother, who extended a hand to me. "Alice, you saved my daughter and my granddaughter. Our home is open to you for as long as you need." And so, at 55, I packed my bags and left the house where I had lived for more than 2 decades. I moved into Sarah's parents' house in Oro Valley, a quiet town just outside of Tucson. There, for the first time since I was 15, I experienced what it was like to live without fear. At first, it was strange, even disconcerting, not to have to ask permission to go out, to watch television, to use the phone, to be able to choose the clothes I wanted to wear, the time I went to bed and woke up. Small freedoms that many take for granted, but for me were daily revolutions. Sarah was there too, with little Sophia. Slowly, we began to heal together. She, so young, had a chance to start over. I, already in middle age, felt like I was learning to live for the first time. I got a job in a small craft shop. I was always good with my hands, sewing, crocheting, embroidery skills that Walter had despised as idle woman's things. Now, these same skills earned me a small salary, the first money I had ever earned through my own effort. Sarah's parents were good, simple people who treated me with a respect I had never known in a home. Mr. Baker especially seemed determined to show me that not all men were like Walter or my sons. Mrs. Martin, you don't have to serve me first at the table. In this house, everyone is equal. Small lessons in dignity that I absorbed day after day. Slowly, I began to rebuild myself as a person, to discover who Alice was without the chains of fear. Contact with my sons was scarce during that first year. Attempts at reconciliation always ended in accusations, in veiled threats. Until one day, to my surprise, Daniel appeared alone at his in-laws' door. "Mom," he said, his eyes downcast, "I'm in therapy. I'm trying to understand what happened to us, to all of us." It was the beginning of a long journey. Daniel was the first to truly recognize the evil we had lived through, the evil he had perpetuated. Through him, with much time and patience, I began to rebuild a relationship with Michael as well. James, the oldest, the most like his father, was the last, and to this day, our relationship is distant, formal. Daniel and Sarah attempted a reconciliation, but with strict conditions set by her parents. He had to continue therapy, attend the support group, and demonstrate real changes in behavior. It was a slow process, with ups and downs, but it eventually yielded results. In 2010, at the age of 57, I decided it was time to have my own space. With the money I had saved from my job at the craft shop, plus a little help from Mr. and Mrs. Baker, I managed to buy a simple little house in Phoenix, a new city, where no one knew me, where I could start over without the weight of the past. My house was small, 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and a small backyard, but it was mine. I painted the walls the color I wanted, arranged the furniture the way I liked, and planted the flowers I had always dreamed of having. For the first time in my life, I created a space that reflected who I was, not what someone forced me to be. The medicinal herb garden started almost by accident. A neighbor gave me mint and rosemary seedlings. Another brought basil and oregano. I remembered my grandmother's knowledge, the plants she cultivated back in Cottonwood Creek. Gradually, I transformed that small space into a healing garden for myself and for others. The news spread quickly in the neighborhood. Mrs. Martin has a remedy for everything. I started receiving visits from people seeking relief for minor ailments, headaches, insomnia, digestive problems. I would prepare the teas, infusions, and poultices, always accompanied by a good conversation. And that's how, without realizing it, I created a new family, not of blood, but of choice. Neighborhood women who would gather in my kitchen, sharing stories, supporting one another. Some fleeing situations similar to the one I had lived through, others simply looking for a space where they could be heard, respected. Sarah and Sophia came to visit me regularly. My granddaughter was growing up strong, intelligent, full of opinions and dreams, everything I could never be at her age. Daniel would come along, sometimes a different man from the one my husband had raised. Therapy helped him break the cycle, to recognize the toxic patterns he had learned since childhood. Michael eventually found his way too. After the divorce, he went through a difficult period, but the shock of losing his family forced him to question everything he believed. Today, he has a cordial relationship with Linda. He visits his children regularly, and has even started a new relationship, this time, I hope, based on mutual respect. James was the only one who never really changed. He lost Jessica, his job, the respect of the community. He became bitter, isolated, blaming everyone but himself for the destruction of his life. I still have hope that one day he will see the truth, but I know that some people can never completely break with the past. As for me, I discovered that it's never too late to start over, to reinvent yourself. At 60, I did something I never imagined possible. I went back to school. I earned my high school equivalency through the GED program. The following year, I enrolled in my first community college classes. It was difficult, of course, after so many decades away from school, but each small achievement was a trophy against everything they tried to take from me. Today, At 72, I look back and see the path I've traveled. From the naive girl in Cottonwood Creek, to the broken woman in Flagstaff and Tucson, to finally becoming the person I am today in Phoenix, a survivor, a woman who found her voice after decades of forced silence. The herb garden continues to grow, just like me. Each new plant that sprouts is a reminder that life always finds a way, even in the most arid soils, even after the most devastating storms. And that girl I fought for, my granddaughter Sophia, is now 17. Smart, determined, with plans to study law to defend women like you and Mom, Grandma. When I hear her talk like that, I know it was all worth it, that the cycle was broken, that the future will be different. Here in Phoenix, my life today is made of small joys. I wake up early with the first ray of sun, a habit I never lost from my girlhood days in Cottonwood Creek. I open the windows, take a deep breath of the fresh morning air, and give thanks for another day of freedom. My house is simple but cozy. On the living room walls, pictures I've embroidered myself, landscapes, flowers, colorful birds. On the bookshelf, the books I've accumulated over the years, after rediscovering the pleasure of reading. The kitchen is the heart of the home, with herbs drying in bunches hanging from the ceiling, glass jars carefully labeled, the wooden table where I welcome friends and neighbors. My routine has the sweet taste of choice. I choose to wake up early to tend to the garden in the cooler hours. I choose what I'll have for breakfast, what I'll wear, where I'll go. Small decisions that many make without thinking, but that for me represent daily victories against a past of impositions. 3 times a week, I go to the senior group at the community center. There, I do water aerobics. I participate in craft workshops. I play dominoes with Betty and Mr. Peterson. These are precious friendships I've built in my years in Phoenix. People who met me already free, who don't carry the weight of knowing my whole past. On Wednesdays, I host the prayer group I formed with some ladies from the neighborhood. We are 8 women, all with intense life stories, some similar to mine. We pray together, share worries and joys, and have tea with homemade cookies. It's a sacred moment of the week, where we strengthen each other. My small medicinal herb business has grown slowly. I started by selling only to neighbors, then to acquaintances of acquaintances. Today, I have a loyal clientele that comes from various neighborhoods in Phoenix. I don't earn much. My retirement, though modest, is my main source of income, but it's enough to buy new books, give presents to my grandchildren, and take an occasional trip to visit Sarah in Tucson. Daniel and Sarah reconciled completely after years of therapy and hard work. He became a different man from the one he was raised to be. When I see him playing with Sophia, teaching her with kindness, respecting her opinions even when he disagrees, I feel that at least one part of my struggle was worth it. Besides Sophia, I have 5 other grandchildren. The sons of Michael and Linda, Walter Jr. and Christopher, are now in their early 20s. Despite their parents' divorce, they grew up knowing the value of respect. Michael learned the hard way that the model of a father he knew was not what he wanted to reproduce. Today, he maintains a friendly relationship with Linda, and his new partner, Odette, is a strong woman who would accept nothing less than equality. James has 2 children with Jessica, Jacob, and Mia. After the divorce, he disappeared for years, only recently reappearing in his children's lives. Our conversations are still tense, formal, full of uncomfortable silences, but at least now we talk. It's a start, albeit a late one. The technology that was once denied to me is now an ally. I learned to use a cell phone. I have my own tablet where I read books, watch recipe videos, and most importantly, keep in touch with family and friends. I make video calls with my grandchildren. I participate in WhatsApp groups with my friends from the community center. I follow pages on growing herbs and medicinal plants. My garden remains my greatest joy. In recent years, I've expanded it to include ornamental flowers as well. Orchids are my favorite. They require patience, constant care, but reward you with flowers of extraordinary beauty like life, I sometimes think. Neighbors stop to admire them when they are in bloom, and I always have seedlings to give to anyone who is interested. I hold no grudge from the past. It took time, a lot of time and a lot of therapy, but I learned that resentment would only keep me chained to old pains. Walter has been gone for a long time. The damage he caused remains as scars on my soul that sometimes still ache when the weather changes, but they do not define who I am today. My little house in Phoenix has become a safe harbor, not just for me, but for other women in the community. It's not uncommon to receive visits from younger ladies brought by mutual friends who come just for a cup of tea. I recognize in their eyes the same fear I carried, the same rehearsed excuses for bruises and broken bones. I offer tea, understanding, and when they are ready, the phone number of people who can really help. On Sundays, I attend the local church, not the large cathedral downtown, but a small chapel in the neighborhood. Father David is a kind man who preaches about love and mutual respect. After Mass, there's always a community coffee where people chat, share news, and strengthen the bonds that unite us as a community. My life today is simple but deeply satisfying. Every decision I make, every moment of tranquility, every night of sleep without nightmares is a victory over the past. I live alone, but I never feel lonely. My house is always open to anyone who needs a cup of tea, a conversation, a shoulder to cry on. Sometimes I sit in my rocking chair on the porch, looking at the garden I created with my own hands, and I think about the long journey that brought me here. From the frightened girl in Cottonwood Creek, to the broken woman in Flagstaff and Tucson, to finally becoming the person I am today in Phoenix. There was so much pain along the way, so many dark nights, so many moments when I thought I wouldn't survive until dawn. But I survived. More than that, I learned to truly live, to flourish even in the stony ground I was given. And when I see my granddaughter Sophia, with her dreams of law school and plans to help other women, I know that my story doesn't end with me, that every small act of courage, even a late one, can change not just one life, but future generations. This afternoon, Daniel called to say he's coming to visit next weekend, bringing Sophia, who wants to show me the universities she's researching for the college entrance exams next year. I'm going to make a cinnamon coffee cake, her favorite since she was a child, and maybe a special tea to calm the anxiety I know she feels with these important decisions. And so my life in Phoenix goes on, day after day, season after season, harvesting the sweet fruits I planted after so many years of storms. It's not a perfect life, no life is, but it's mine. One with tears, with courage, with the determination of a woman who one day decided she deserved more than to survive. She deserved to live. My dears, you who have followed me this far, patiently listening to this old lady's story, let me share what I've learned on this long journey. If my story touches the heart of at least one person who is living what I lived, it will have been worth it. To you who are trapped in an abusive relationship, who wake up every day in fear, who hide the marks with makeup and the pain with forced smiles, I want to say, you are not alone. What is happening is not normal. It is not love. It is not your fault. You deserve respect, affection, freedom. You deserve a life without fear. I know it seems impossible to leave. The chains of fear are stronger than any iron shackle. Where will I go, you ask yourself? How will I support myself? And my children? What if he finds me? These are the same questions that tormented me for decades. But listen to what I say. There is a way out. It may not be fast. It may not be easy, but it exists. Seek help from a trusted friend, a family member who won't judge, from organizations that exist specifically for women like us. Small steps, one day at a time. I learned that surviving is a form of resistance, but living well is the ultimate victory. My story is not defined by what was done to me, but by what I chose to do with the time I had left. It took me 55 years to understand that my voice, even when trembling, had the power to shatter walls of silence. Your voice has that power too. To the men who were taught that masculinity is control, my son Daniel learned that true strength is found in kindness, not cruelty. To the families and neighbors who look away, do not underestimate the power of a helping hand. I waited decades for one. Do not let other women wait so long. And to you, the woman who feels trapped, who thinks it is too late, it is never too late to claim your own story. Your life is not over. The most beautiful chapter, the one you write yourself, is still waiting. Thank you for being here and for listening to my story. If these words mean something to you, please, lend me a hand, share this video immediately. Somewhere out there might be a woman who needs to hear this, who is desperately waiting for a hand to reach out. Just one share from you could be the difference between another day lost in suffering and the first step on the path to reclaiming her own life. Don't hesitate. Every day that passes is another day someone has to endure. And if you've listened all the way to these final words, please leave me the word freedom in the comments. A word that took me decades of darkness to fully understand its true meaning. Your small act today could be the beginning for another woman, someone who is suffering just as I once did. Thank you so much for listening to this old lady's heartfelt story. You have given me a priceless gift that Walter and my sons could never take away from me. The power of being heard, the value of my own life story. I am truly grateful for that. Finally, if this story has touched your heart, please subscribe to this channel. Every single subscription is an immense source of motivation, giving me more strength to continue this journey so that our story can spread to even more women, so they know that they are not alone.